Hi again, everyone. This video is sponsored by contribution from Tom, and here's his story. Hi, Ali. I wanted to see what you think of my story of my childhood. I was adopted when I was 5 years old. I moved into a big 3-story house my adoptive father built. It was a dream come true. My adoptive parents adopted my biological brother, Tim, and a girl, Jennifer, who was sexually abused by her parents. About a year after I was adopted, I remember one night my parents let me and Jennifer sleep together in the same room. The girl Jennifer turned over to me and said, "Do you want to have sex?" I said, "Sure," and tried to have sex with her. Jennifer was 8 years old at the time. I often wonder why my narcissistic parents would be so stupid to allow a girl they knew was sexually abused to sleep with me. Do you think it was on purpose? Or they're just shitty parents? Well, as much as I love to shit on shitty parenting, and I know I've done some stories for you in the past, you know, I think you're about my age, and you know, the education just wasn't there when we were kids about sexual abuse like this. Wasn't talked about. It wasn't like it is now. So as much as I would love to say from what you're saying there, did your parents set that up? You know, at 8 years old, you don't expect an 8-year-old to be that sexual, to be sexual like that. They're not supposed to be, unless we know now, unless you're abused, and they just might not have known. You know, because the education really wasn't there that many years ago. This sexual relationship lasted 5 years. Oh, wow. After about a year, Jennifer told my cousin we were having sex. The rumor got back to my parents. My mother sat me down in Jennifer's bedroom and asked me if I had sex with Jennifer, and I said I did. My mother said, "Well, if you like to have sex with her, why don't you have sex with me?" Oh, shit. All right, well, I guess I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I don't know what that's like. I'm going to leave and do something. When I get back, we're going to have sex. When my mother came back, I was crying and said I didn't want to have sex with Jennifer anymore. My mother let me go and we didn't have sex. About a year later, Jennifer came to me and said, "We can still have sex." I gave in and started that sexual relationship up again. We were having sex everywhere. I had sex with her in the house, at the YMCA, at baseball games, and at church. She told her middle school psychologist about our sexual relationship. It got back to my parents, and I told them we weren't having sex because of the fear of my narc mother and shame. They made me sit in their room for an hour as they interrogated me and Jennifer. I convinced them Jennifer was the liar. Maybe they knew it was true and didn't want to believe it. I talked to the school psychologist and convinced the psychologist I wasn't having sex with her. Jennifer was a black sheep in the family. My mother looked highly on intelligence. Jennifer wasn't very intelligent according to her IQ test. She was in special education. That doesn't necessarily mean IQ tests don't mean anything. I mean, based on what this girl went through before the age of 8, where she's asking her adoptive brother to have sex, and I felt very guilty most of my life over this issue, and I do take any blame for it that I deserve. I just wonder what blame falls on my parents for allowing us to have slept together that night when I was 5 years old. it affected me my whole life. I hadn't had more than one girlfriend, and the one I had looked like the one that looked like Jennifer. I find that I'm still very aroused by thoughts of that past sexual behavior. I was seen as a more highly intelligent person because in elementary school my tests showed that I was getting smarter and smarter. My mother made me into a golden child because of it. It was ridiculous. In the third grade, they were trying to teach me algebra, and I couldn't learn it. My mother acted like I was Einstein. I think I, I think it hurt me a lot because as I got older, I found out I'm not Einstein. I may be above average intelligence, but that's about it. My mother and father were saying I'm college material. They made that path I should seek when I was 10 years old, and I could care less. They just couldn't let me enjoy life and be a kid. I ended up going to college and didn't like it. It was like going back to high school, and I hated high school. I now find myself at 35 years old trying to simply get a good job. I think if my mother hadn't done what she did, that maybe I would have gotten a decent skill instead of going to college. I would be better off now. My mother didn't even take care of me when I was growing up. My mother let her narc grandmother take care of all the kids they adopted. I remember when I was 6 years old that my narc grandmother kept looking over my shoulder all the time and yelling at me. I got so sick of it that I started to avoid her. She confronted me in the hallway and said, "Why are you being so hateful to me?" I said, "Because you keep looking over my shoulder all the time and bothering me." She forcefully grabbed me after that and started saying, "I love you, I love you, I love you." I said, "Let go of me." And she said she wouldn't. When we would go to church, my grandmother would put on her narc mask and acted all lovely. The second we got home, she took the mask off and started acting all nasty. I noticed that when I was 7 years old and knew it was wrong. Her husband killed himself. I kind of wonder if that's why I was adopted, to keep her supplied. It seems my mother wanted to give her grandmother all the kids to watch for some reason. I wonder if it was for the supply. I was often kicked off the elementary school bus for fighting. Most of the time I was simply defending myself. When I got home, my father would take off his belt and whip me, even though I told him it wasn't my fault. It was self-defense. I was bullied by 3 kids in third grade. I beat one of them up, and that made me popular. So I started kicking the crap out of bullies, and everyone liked it, so I kept doing it. All right, so let me explain here what exactly is going on here in your family. Your parents basically tried to adopt a perfect family, and there's a lot going on in the dynamic. Um, I'm sure your mother was abused by by her grandmother. That's what's setting all this up. Probably has a lot to do with why your grandfather killed himself. Now, I don't necessarily think she could have that she put you in there at 5 years old and her at 8, thinking you guys would have sex. Maybe. Maybe not. It's not important to your problem because how she reacted to it is just very telling. Why don't you have sex with me? And right there, I mean, there it is, son husband type of deal. Trying to adopt a son husband, trying to adopt things for her grandmother to do, so I'm sure she can go live her own life. And this is further evidenced by your father's reaction to you being able to stand up to yourself, for defending yourself. He beat you for defending yourself. So not only do you have a sexually abused sister, and I don't blame your sister for this. This is all on your parents. Because as soon as it happened the first time, it should have been, whoa, stop. And they didn't do anything that was necessary here. Nothing. Maybe they felt because there's no blood relation between maybe that made it all right in their minds. In their rationalized, fucked up minds. That's how they rationalized it. But your mother liked it. Your mother liked it. And your father is obviously controlled by your mother, because what man beats their son for standing up to bullies on a school bus? He needed you to be weak because he needed you to be the target of her bullshit. Because he's a coward. He don't want you standing up to anybody. He don't want you standing up to her. So he would beat you down to make you that son husband you were adopted to be. When I was in 5th grade, I was told kids were stabbing each other in middle school by my uncle. So I decided to stop fighting. I went to my mother and told her I'm going to stop fighting. She looked at me and laughed. I wonder why she insisted I get whipped with a belt for fighting on the school bus then. She laughed. She was gaslighting you. She was laughing in your face. I beat you. You're my son husband. That's why. That's why. Right there. Right there. My grandmother got in on the action too by saying he got kicked off the school bus again. Discipline him. They're sexual sadists. These women are sexual sadists. They're getting some kind of sexual pleasure out of all of this. When I was in 7th grade, I got my mother, found out I had smoked marijuana and wasn't living up to her grooming. She made me go to a private Christian school. I thought at the time it was because we were a Christian family. Now I realize it was more about control. My mother sent me there to get me under her control. Right. Son husband, control, religion on top of it. It's all about mental control. I remember in either grade, I remember in 8th grade when I graduated, I gave a speech and everyone was clapping for me. I was completely calm during the speech and my mother made a big deal about it. That year and the next is when my parents started fighting because you weren't around. My mother wanted to start a business as an accountant and my father wanted her to stay home and take care of us kids. That was the beginning of the end. My father put a computer under the house and caught my mother having an affair on the internet. They said this in front of me when I was 14 years old. My mother said in the past he was having an affair with a neighbor. I remember nights of being in the kitchen and they were fighting in my father's office. One time my father walked out of the office so mad that he grabbed the broom and broke it in front of me. My mother asked me what I thought of them getting divorced and I said, you got to do what you got to do. I didn't know what else to say. I saw my mother sitting on the stairs saying out loud, I can't do this anymore. Do you know why your father sent you, listen, do you know why your father decided to check, put the internet under the house at that point? Because you were sent away to Catholic school and you weren't there to be the supply. And you came out, but your father actually learned a lesson from you. Because he was beating you, what he was beating his own reflection. He was beating the example of what he was afraid to be, of what he couldn't be. When my parents sold the house, I moved in with my father. My mother and father weren't getting along at all at that time. After ninth grade, I decided to go back to public school. Around the time of the divorce, I remember we went to this Indian restaurant in San Francisco. My mother was pushing my father at dinner, telling him to stand up and give a speech. He was all scared and his face was blushing and he could hardly speak. It affected me for some reason. Why? Because he was reverting. Why it affected you? Because he was reverting back to the guy he was. See, what you were seeing there is what your father escaped from. Why he would beat you for fighting back on the bus, because he was too fucking chicken shit to fight back himself. He was beating you like he was trying to break a mirror, trying to break the example. Stop putting it in front of my face. But it wasn't until they said they fucked up trying to teach you a lesson by sending you to Catholic school. And what it did was it gave your father the balls to catch your mother on her bullshit and do something about it. And why this made you so uncomfortable is because your father was reverting back to the guy he was when he was beating you. Because that fear and that stuttering of your mother sitting there is exactly why he was beating you like that. When I was in ninth grade, I had to read Romeo and Juliet out loud in front of the class, and I started acting like my father. I could hardly breathe from the anxiety and walked out of the classroom. It was weird because that never happened before. Right, because you had just witnessed it. And now in your subconscious is like, can this happen to me now? Even though you and your father aren't blood related, this is the nature over nurture thing. You were nurtured by this, okay? You're affected by narcissistic abuse by a family that you have no blood relation to. That's how you know most of this is behavioral. It's environment. The year before, I gave a few speeches in front of a class and was just fine. It still affects me to this day. It really bothers me. It bothers you because you are by proxy putting your mother in that room. That's what's happening. For some reason, I don't remember a whole lot the few years after the divorce. I remember my father was really down. I told him that bad things happen in life, and he was saying I'm wise. My mother got upset when I was talking on the phone with her and said that my father is turning me against her. I lived about 2 miles away from my high school. My father brought me a bike and made me ride it to school every day. I never even got a car or driver's license until I was 21. I think my father had limited contact at that time with my mother. Probably. He was still trying to make her happy by doing that shit. I remember he was trying to get back into her life and keep the family together. He would drop me off at my mother's house during the holidays. I started smoking marijuana a lot when I was 17. I would ditch school often and tell my father to give me a note for the days I didn't go. He never cared and never gave me a note. He caught me one morning after I smoked a joint and said, "You're high on that shit right now." And I said, "Like you even care," and walked away. He never said anything else about it to me after that. No discipline? Weird. Not really, being that your mother and grandmother weren't standing over you telling them to kick the shit out of you. Probably feels guilty. Sometimes he forced me to go to church with him. It's probably a part of the reason I have such problems with religion. The hypocrisy when it comes to religion in my family has been appalling. Jennifer ended up ditching the family and going back to her other abusive parents. She even changed her last name. My brother Tim started smoking crack for about a decade before getting off it and married. I joined the U.S. Army for a few years. A part of the reason I joined was because of the guilt put on me by my mother. I felt maybe the military would straighten me out. I think I was repunishing myself, doing the work for my mother. That's exactly what you were doing. Well, the military did some good things for me, but it didn't straighten me out. It gave me more anxiety problems. I got honorably discharged and disabled only after a year. I failed my 12th grade English class. The interesting thing is that my 12th grade English teacher told the class that in his 20 years of teaching, I wrote the best paper he ever read about Shakespeare's Hamlet. He said I could have the floor to tell everyone about my paper. I was so stoned and scared that I shook my head and said no. He hung my paper up on the class bulletin board for everyone to read. The reason I think I wrote such a good paper on Hamlet was because I lived a similar life. I believe Hamlet is very much a story about narcissism. Hamlet's father was murdered by his brother. Hamlet didn't want to kill his uncle because he wanted his uncle to go to hell. According to his religion, if he had murdered his uncle, then his uncle would have gone to purgatory. Hamlet had everything he could want shattered by his father's murder. It almost drove him insane. He wanted revenge. That's why he didn't murder his uncle. His entire reality was shown to have all been like a dream. It's the same way with the narcissist. We have this fantasy persona presented to us and we fall for it. Then the person behind the persona kills the persona, and we're left with Hamlet's disgusting murdering uncle. We want revenge, but we know that we won't get it by murder. Our narcissist can only go to hell by us having no contact. I've said that multiple times. No contact is your revenge on the narcissist. You need to understand, Tom, what happened here. I thought we were about the same age. You're about 9 years younger than me. So you were 14 and you already had a computer under the house on the internet. So there was a lot more known about sexual abuse at that point than I thought. So there's a greater possibility your mother thought something like that could happen. I don't know. I think she's so self-absorbed and narcissistic. It doesn't matter because how she reacted to it was completely wrong. What you witnessed in that restaurant in San Francisco was you watched your father implode in front of your mother on your strength. Don't think your mother didn't know your father would freeze up. Don't think your mother didn't set your father up like that to put it in your head this can happen to you. And it has over and over and over again. Your mother and grandmother, they got problems. Have you gone to therapy? See, your sister was 3 years older than you, is 3 years older than you. Started when you were 5. That's sexual abuse. And when your mother said, why don't you have sex with her? That's sexual abuse. Did they send you to therapy? Of course not. Of course not. Whether they knew or not beforehand is incidental to the question at this point. It really isn't. Because how they've reacted after it, since, and to this day is all you need to know. Your mother wanted a son husband. Your father was weak. Your father's job was to keep you weak, keep you from fighting back. The second you're out of the house, they're trying to teach you a lesson by sending you away to a private Catholic school. Lo and behold, your father grows a set of nuts, catches your mother screwing around on the internet, and divorces her. All while you're away, right? You take away the narc supply, they're going to turn on someone else. And you decided to live with your father, then you You went to that restaurant, and soon as that's like bringing the cancer back into the body, you're going to get sick again. And that's what happened. And that moment freaked you out. And that is what's causing your issues now. Your issues with speaking out loud is you're hung up on that. This is me. This is it's part of her. That's what's going on now. And the military is good, could gives you guidance, but I got a lot of military people on my channel. A lot. And there's tons and tons and tons of narcissism. If you've been abused by narcissism, the military usually isn't a good fit for you. And I'm pro-military. I love the military, so we need our military. I'm not anti-military at all. Okay, but they're breaking you down and building you back up to make you a soldier. Okay? The problem is when guys like us, I've never been in the military, go into the military. You're going in already broken. So when they build you back up, there's no foundation. The foundation is still broken. They're breaking you down to your foundation because you are who you are. No matter what, you are who you are. But if your foundation is crumbled already and then they build the military stuff on top, that's why it's falling. You have to clear this up. You have to get this right in your head first about what happened to you. You have to understand where your anxiety is coming from. And it's all coming from your mother and the guilt of what happened with your sister. That's not your fault. That's not her fault. That's all their fault. All of it. I mean, in high school, or before high school, middle school, they're confronting you on this sleeping with your sister. Who's going to admit that in high school? What? They didn't want to know. They didn't want it proven. They didn't care. They didn't care. If there was a way to return you to where they got you from, I think they probably would have. So, thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you for your story. I really appreciate it. It's a hell of a story right out of the box, boy. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, or you'd like to set up a Skype chat, phone call, or have a private video made, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. And if there's any more confusion, at the end, there's a link that pops up on the screen, is an instructional video to exactly how to send a story and contribute to the channel. Also, please like this video, share it where you can, and subscribe. And remember to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. This is Ali Matthews. Thanks for watching. See you all again soon.